Here we go. There's the antitrust statement. So Kentucky Fried Chicken approached us about developing a breakfast menu or a breakfast strategy for them in the UK, which included creating the strategy itself and also creating the specific menu items that needed to live into that strategy to make it successful. So we're going to tell you today about what we did, what we learned, and what we recommended. But before we get there, we're going to lay a little bit of groundwork for how we approach innovation, because that's key to understanding our approach. To put it succinctly, we believe in insight, which as a blanket statement might sound a little bit generic, but that's probably because we look at insight from a little bit of a different perspective. And that term itself, we feel like it's kind of been abducted. It's been misused, misrepresented, it's been bastardized. It's not unlike that word creative, if you think about it. Creative is a noun, it's an adjective, it's a title, it's a department, it's become a catch-all for anything and everything. And the same thing has happened with that term insight, okay? So for example, worst of all, it's become synonymous with an observation. How many of you have walked out of a focus group room and heard somebody say, or maybe you even said it yourself, man, we got a lot of great insights out of that group? Well, we would argue that you didn't, that you learned a lot of really interesting things, but we put the bar for insight at kind of a higher level. Here's how we would define it: as a fresh, intimate understanding of your target's beliefs that has the power to genuinely change their behavior. After communicating your insight, your target should feel a bit of tension, surprised how well you know them and eager to hear more about what you have to say. All right? Now, this is something that we often look at through the lens of communication, but it's just as important to leverage when innovating. We have an example. I'll give you an anecdote of that. So one of the founders of Brado, his name is Bob Cuneo. Bob has a daughter named Ella. A couple of years ago, she was about 5 years old, was opening up a Christmas present. And she just started kind of gently peeling away the wrapper like little kids do, and then getting more excited as she saw what was inside. Finally ripped the wrapper off, opened it up, held it in front of her and said, "Wow, I never knew I always wanted this." And we think that that's what an innovation that's founded upon a deep consumer insight can do. It can make your consumer realize that they want something they never even considered beforehand. How do you get to there? One word: empathy. Empathy is you showing another person that you understand what makes them them. And in order to do that, you have to understand who they are, not just inside the category, but outside of the category as well. You have to get them as a whole person, because if you just look in the category, you're missing half of them or even more. Okay? So this is what we did with Kentucky Fried Chicken. We used what we call our values link process. A values link is a 90-minute IDI. The first half of that conversation has nothing to do with the brand. It's got nothing to do with the category. It is all about getting to know who they are as people. And they're not haphazard questions. They're developed in conjunction with a clinical psychologist. On the surface, they're seemingly innocuous, but they build. They go deeper and deeper and deeper. And by the time you get to the 45-minute mark in that conversation, they are incredibly emotionally vested in it and able to speak about brands in a way that you seldom hear consumers talk about brands in a research setting. With KFC, we spoke to half loyalists and half non-loyalists, because what we like to do is understand who are these people that love the brand, what makes them really love KFC, and what makes other people not really love it. With those learnings, we can then help the brand expand their ability to connect with people they're not currently connecting with. It's a conversation that you have to be very patient with. When we do this with clients who haven't done it before, that first half of the conversation, they can get a little bit antsy because they're used to having research done where you pose questions very directly and you get more direct type answers. That's not this. But what it does is, for those questions that would otherwise surface in the back half of the interview, when somebody says, wow, that's kind of odd. Why do they do that? Why do they believe that about our brand or about the category? Or why do they do this? Well, we point to the front half and we go, well, it's because this is who they are as people. This is what they believe. This is what happened to them in their childhood or some other pivotal moment in their life. This is them to the core. And it becomes a very disarming, very honest, very emotional conversation. As Chris said, I've done dozens of these projects over the years. I can't think of a single one where somebody didn't cry. I mean, we're talking about breakfast. We're talking about mouthwash. We're talking to doctors, okay? These conversations go deep. If you think about it, when was the last time that somebody sat down with you and asked you 45 minutes worth of questions just about you? They just wanted to understand who you were. Probably hadn't happened, and if it has, you probably paid for it. And there might have been tears. All right? But what you get out of this is a really clear, vivid picture of who they are as people, what their motivations are, what their attitudes are, and not just what they do, but why they do it. Okay? Andy's going to come up here now and tell you how we took this and turned that into strategy for breakfast.
Thanks, Steve. So we jumped into this exciting breakfast space in the UK with people who eat fast food for breakfast, right? So bear in mind, we're already talking with people who are on the move, right? They've made a decision, this is where I've got to go, this is what I have time for, this is what's in my consideration set, all right? So leveraging Values Link, we had to understand where the space was to move outside of that. So unlocking breakfast became this critical drive. It's the reason KFC called us, because if it was as simple as just going, hey, here's some beans and HP sauce and go have yourself a really good time, they'd have done that. Right? But trying to offset the major category player, i.e. the arches, if you know who I'm talking about, and find a product that works with people and makes it very appealing, took diving in to those values. And what we uncovered was that there were some key drivers for breakfast. And the first thing that drove was this idea of my time, right? So once again, people start off with a lot of stuff going on in their head. I mean, most of us are probably on the road today, and so beginning in a hotel is a little bit different than starting in your house, but you're already thinking about the 14 emails you just got, the things you have to do with your family, how you're gonna commute, where you're gonna go, and what the KFC consumer told us was, I just need a moment. I just need that breakfast to have a visceral little opportunity for me to pause, give me a chance to reflect, a chill out mode. And then we ask them over the course of these interviews to physically show us what that looks like, and it looks like this. You see that eyes shut, hands up? It's like a bubble around their head, right? And here's the interesting thing. It doesn't matter how crowded that restaurant is. It doesn't matter if they're sitting at their desk, Pandora's playing on the music over them, is that they have that moment in time where it's just for them. It just gives them a moment to reflect. And once we started diving in and really understanding what set off my time was the first bite. And that first bite is the magic moment that signifies that my time has begun, right? Now, for some of us, maybe not a KFC fan, I can certainly relate because my time starts with the first sip, right? And I'm talking about coffee. I'm not starting my moment with a Harvey Wallbanger or anything like that. Later, that'll be another my time. That first bite was a critical moment for us to understand for them, especially as we began to leverage that for how do we position this breakfast, and how do we build products that are gonna fit in my time, right? First bite, these are some of my favorite moments. Like my taste buds are electrified. I swear if I could do this in a British accent, I would. It's a fusion, it's mushing it all together. This is where the counseling comes in, but you can tell this next quote follows directly off of a very emotional 45 minutes spent. It's like marriage. You've courted this girl for 5 years. Everything arrives at once, right? Like an old soul said that, right? Don't you picture that? Like some guy in his 80s, maybe? The mouth widens to its highest point. It's a big, chunky bite. It's a greedy bite, right? That opportunity to leverage that moment in time for that consumer was a visceral experience that had an emotional impact. It was setting the tone for the rest of their day. You know what it's like when your day starts off bad. You know what it's like when your day starts off smooth. Things are moving in step. People can't afford to make mistakes at breakfast. My time is a point in time for the rest of your day. Once we understood how important it was to leverage that, then we knew the areas that we needed to go and unlock to give them those visceral moments. So became this balance between craveability and familiarity. Now, the interesting thing is that I've been doing new product development for a long, long time, right? I've actually helped Frito-Lay come up with a potato chip. Well, it's a corn chip that actually delivers different tastes in time release, right? If you don't believe me, look up the X13D, right? And depending on how old you are, that taste is either going to end on ketchup or pickle, and I swear. That's true, right? Guess when you're not willing to end on ketchup or pickle? Breakfast, right? Nobody wants to take chances at breakfast. I mean, that's the reason that, you guys know the Luther sandwich, right? Hamburger, bacon between 2 Krispy Kreme donuts. That's the reason it's not a breakfast sandwich. That's a chance you take at lunch. That's not a risk you take at breakfast. This craveability has to deliver. This understanding that first bite has to be a moment in time that sets the stage, and then you move forward with the rest of your life. So here's how we then leverage those values linked to make sure it fit in with KFC's brand. First of all, these consumers see themselves as adventurous and open-minded. They really believe that they are. So one of the reasons they're going over to KFC. I mean, they're in the UK, they see KFC at breakfast as a little taste of Americana. That's adventurous to them. KFC provides that familiar adventure. They're not going to deviate too far outside of that. They value staying true to themselves. They think KFC is true to their brand as well. And what they really want is more time. Better yet, they want to stop and enjoy that moment in time, even if it's only for a moment. KFC gives them my time, briefly that retreat into themselves. And then finally, the perfect combination for breakfast is that flavor, that sensory. It's that moment that shuts down everything you're doing and gets that first bite that establishes my time. So that's what we had to do. So in short, we moved this into Insight platforms, took these interviews and leveraged them over to what's the opportunity. Really understanding how we can play off what those values were with the consumer, understand where the values that KFC could move over and what the brand had equity in, gave us 3 platforms that we could then develop new ideas off of. Well, those new ideas then moved into a workshop. We worked in conjunction with the team, with R&D, and with their consumer to create these new ideas. Then allowed us a chance to optimize those ideas, create this concept under the first bite, where we could go and talk to consumers and say, if KFC were to reach out to you, put out a promotional opportunity and talk about that moment in time, talk about that opportunity to retreat into yourself and just have that first bite deliver everything, and these were the kinds of concepts that could do that, does that resonate with you? Well, surprisingly not. All those consumers said that's exactly what I want. I'm looking for that kind of moment to let me move throughout my day and then get on with the rest of it. The values link help us leverage that relationship, help us understand what those values were, and then let us move forward with creating the kinds of not just message, but products that were going to fit well within their lives. Let me see if I can just move on real quick. Just a couple other little examples here. We've also had a chance to do this in pharmaceutical packaging. Interestingly enough, when the stakes get higher and we start talking about, life and death and disease states and things that help us move on, the values remain exactly the same as they do as a breakfast sandwich, right? People still are people. And at their heart, they're looking for products or services that are helping them just move from one point in time to another. So when we understand what those values are, and then we can leverage them over to solving those tensions that are in their lives, it gives us a chance to really unlock some new opportunities. Interestingly enough, when we do it in conjunction with a multifaceted team, we can bring everybody together. They can hear these conversations that are happening in real time and then begin to troubleshoot and say, this is a solution, and I heard that this was the tension that we need to solve for. It gives us a chance to speed that process up or at least remove some of the steps that typically slow us down. Lastly, I want to point out is that we've also had a chance to do this with millennial males and their snacking habits. And I just want to ask, are there any millennial males in the room here today? You're disgusting. You're disgusting. You're nothing short of just putting a trough on your chest and just shoveling snack goods into your face. Interesting for us in the millennial male, as we start to consider some of those values that they have, it laddered up to a very emotional space as well. And you're thinking about a guy, this is a guy who just got out of school. And believe it or not, he was the top dog. If some of you like me are kind of far removed from college, you were the big man on campus for a while. You're a senior in a fraternity house, people know your name. You're a guy who gets around and people like to say hi. Guess what happens when you show up corporate America first day? You're getting somebody's coffee, right? You are not the man anymore. When these guys got home at 5 o'clock, you know what they were doing? They were filling the sadness void inside of themselves. That's right, that's reality. And so we gave them those moments. We're like, what kind of tools is it going to take to fill that moment? And they responded in kind. They told us exactly what they were looking for and how they would do it. And that's the process I think we can take it through with any brand or client to really find a solution. Lisa.